Welcome, 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 everyone. This evening we commemorate the centenary of the ascension of Abdu'l-Bahá with the third of our PG Town Hall meetings. We have a wonderful program of stories, writings, prayers, and songs, and we welcome you to share yours with us. This November, the world will commemorate the 100th anniversary of the passing of Abdu'l-Bahá. The Universal House of Justice has given us a bounteous glimmering of their planning. Our team has been consulting about local efforts that can help us prepare day by day for that anniversary. Each of us can make a personal commitment to learn more about Abdu'l-Bahá. We can practice telling favorite stories about Abdu'l-Bahā's life and then share them with friends. We can incorporate stories and writings of Abdu'l-Bahá into our core activities. We can invite friends to town hall style gatherings where participants share writings and life stories of Abdu'l-Bahá. Tonight, we will open with a prepared program of stories and writings from Abdu'l-Bahā's departure from Baghdad in 1863 to his arrival in Akka in 1868. Attendees are then invited to share stories and quotes. They can be from other years and other authors, but should help us better understand Abdu'l-Bahá.
O thou kind Lord, thou hast created all humanity from the same stock. Thou hast decreed that all shall belong to the same household. In thy holy presence, they are all thy servants, and all mankind are sheltered beneath thy tabernacle. All have gathered together at thy table of bounty. All are illumined through the light of thy providence. O God, thou art kind to all. Thou hast provided for all. Dost shelter all. Conferrest life upon all. Thou hast endowed each and all with talent and faculties, and all are submerged in the ocean of thy mercy. O thou kind Lord, unite all. Let the religious agree and make the nations one, so that they may see each other as one family and the whole earth as one home. May they all live together in perfect harmony. O God, raise aloft the banner of the oneness of mankind. O God, establish the most great peace. Cement thou, O God, the hearts together. O thou kind Father, God, gladden our hearts through the fragrances of thy love. Brighten our eyes through the light of thy guidance. Delight our ears with the melody of thy word, and shelter us all in the stronghold of thy providence. Thou art the mighty and powerful. Thou art the forgiving, and thou art the one who overlooked the shortcoming of all mankind. Abdu'l-Bahá.
The first part of our program, we're going to look at the history of what's going on in the United States in 1863 to 1868, especially relating to people of African heritage. And then our attention will move to Abdu'l-Bahá in the Ottoman Empire. In the 1860s, you were seeing in the US the Third Great Awakening, a religious revival that had begun a decade earlier, characterized by new church denominations, active missionary work, and in particular, a commitment to personal morality versus ritual and doctrine. In 1863, the Emancipation Proclamation had taken effect, January the 1st. The Civil War in 1865 came to an end after 4 years, but within days, Abraham Lincoln was assassinated. With the ending of the Civil War, we saw the ratification of 3 amendments to the US Constitution within the next 5 years relating to the outcome of the war. The 13th Amendment outlawed slavery. The 14th Amendment granted citizenship to any person born or naturalized in the US. The 15th Amendment guaranteed Black American men the right to vote. But there was a pushback, of course. For instance, 1866, the formation of the Ku Klux Klan, founded to intimidate Blacks and other ethnic and religious minorities for the purpose of reestablishing white authority. There were hundreds of organizations like that. The map on the right, the pink are the states and the brown areas are the territories, not yet states. In 1869, the first Black American diplomat was appointed as an ambassador to Haiti. In 1870, the first African American senator was elected from Mississippi.
Meanwhile, in the Ottoman Empire, Turkey had been developing its reforms and trying to be more modernized. One of the activities that the Ottoman Empire had undertaken to show this interest in becoming modernized was the participation in the world fairs, or as they were called at this time, international expositions that were happening in Europe and the America, where the Orient was coming to the West. One of the things that the Ottoman Empire did was they held their own exposition in 1863. So the images you see here are part of that exposition. The main hall of the exposition on the left in Istanbul, and where the Turkish crown jewels were shown to visitors on the right. Like other empires, there were always attempts by foreign powers to create division and weaken the empire. So there was always the fear that the separatists would gain control of the government or foment discord. As you remember from the last town hall, we mentioned that those who were antagonistic to Baha'u'llah in Baghdad, Constantinople, and Tehran convinced the government of the Ottoman Empire to move Baha'u'llah further from the borders of Persia. So they had to travel to Constantinople. His departure had created so much consternation, grief amongst his followers, as well as many other people have come to love him in the city, that's where we have the celebration of the 12 days of Rezvan, because the family could not pack their belongings with having so many visitors. And so Abdu'l-Bahá arranged for his father to receive visitors at a garden called Najibiyeh, which Baha'u'llah later named Rezvan, or paradise. And people came there instead. It was in that garden, if you recall, that Baha'u'llah declared for the first time openly that he was the one whose coming the Bab had foretold, the promised one of all religions.
When the exiles left Baghdad, Abdu'l-Bahá was 19 years old. Hand of the cause, Hassan Balyuzi later described him as handsome, gracious, agile, zealous to serve, firm with the willful, and gracious to all. On the 3.5 months journey, wherever possible, Abdu'l-Bahá rode beside his father Hauda. Writing in later years, Abdu'l-Bahá described how Jinab Imunib, an ardal and gifted young believer, gave up ease and comfort to accompany the exiles. He gladly measured the desert miles, and he spent his days and nights chanting prayers, communing with God, and calling upon him. Recalling the exhilaration of the journey, Abdu'l-Bahá continued, "There were nights when we would walk on either side of the Howdah of Baha'u'llah, and the joy we had defies description. Some of those nights he would sing poems. Among them he would chant the orders of Hafiz, like the one begin, "Come, let's gather the roses, let us pour out the wine." The journey was about 1,600 miles from Baghdad to Constantinople. It started on May 1863 and ended mid-August 1863. They stopped about 30 stations along the way. From the time when Baha'u'llah's declaration was made in Baghdad, Bahia Khunam recalled that Abdu'l-Bahá took the role of special attendant, servant, and bodyguard of his father. She related that on this journey to Constantinople, he guarded him day and night, riding by his wagon and watching near his tent. He thus had little sleep, and being young became extremely worried. His horse was very fine and so wild and spirited that no other man could mount him. But under my brother's hand, he was gentle and docile as a lamb. In order to get a little rest, he adopted the plan of riding swiftly a considerable distance ahead of the caravan, then dismounting and causing his horse to lie down. He would throw himself on the ground and place his head on the horse's neck. So he would sleep until the cavalcade came up, when his horse would wake him by a kick and he would remount.
As Amir told us, Abdu'l-Bahá with the father and family went from Baghdad to Constantinople in August 1863. They put them in the house that was a terrible condition. Bahia Khanum said they were put in the small house, the men below and the woman above. Baha'u'llah with his family were given 2 rooms. The weather was very cold and damp, and we had no fire or proper clothing. Because of the crowding, the atmosphere was foul. We petitioned for better quarter and were given another house, which was to some extent an improvement. We know when Baha'u'llah was called to move from Baghdad to Constantinople, that was a courteous invitation. But when reached to Constantinople, the government of Iran in Tehran and also the Persian ambassador in Constantinople, both of them told the Ottoman government to order Baha'u'llah go out from the city later in December. Baha'u'llah later said, they expelled us with an abasement with which no abasement on earth can compare. Before they left Constantinople, Bahai Khanum said that always they were coming and telling us that you are going to be separate from each other. We will send Baha'u'llah someplace, family another place, and the companion we will say another place. Bahia Khanum said, this overwhelmed us with apprehension which hung over us and tormented us during the whole of the journey and long after. The dread of this or of the execution of my father was the greatest of our trials. A horrible fear of unknown danger always with us. Such dread were frequently repeated after this time also. If it was not them, these terrible condition, we could have borne our suffering with greater resignation, but this kept us always in a heart sickening suspense. The exiles eventually were ordered to leave right away for Adrianople. Baha'u'llah wrote of that city that it was the place which none entered except such as have rebelled against the authority of the sovereign. Baha'u'llah gave to Abdu'l-Bahá and Mirza Musa the task of receiving the official who delivered the edict of banishment. Everyone had to make preparation to leave very quickly. Once again, Abdu'l-Bahá took on the responsibility of supervising these preparations. In the middle of winter, the entire group of exiles was forced to undertake a 12-day journey through snow and ice and bitter winds to the faraway city of Adrianople, known today by its ancient name, Aderne. Everyone suffered greatly from this journey because they didn't have adequate clothing, food, or shelter. The journey to Adrianople, Baha'i Khanum said the 9 days of the was terrible condition, was very cold, and was the worst experience of travel we had. We arrived at Adrianople all sick, even the young and strong. My brother, that man Abdu'l-Bahá, again had his feet frozen on this journey. Arriving in Adrianople, the entire party was at first crowded into a miserable caravanserai. Bayi Khanum also described how her family of 11 people had to stay in a small house of just 3 rooms just outside the city. It was like a prison, without comforts and surrounded by guard of soldiers. Our only food was the present fare allowed us, which was unsuitable for the children and the sick. She describes how that winter was a period of intense suffering because of the cold, hunger, and being tormented by the vermin. There were many, and all moved about all over the house. This made even the days horrible, she said, and the nights still more so. When they were so intolerable that it was impossible to sleep, my brother would light a lamp, which somewhat intimidated the vermin, and by singing and laughing, seek to restore the spirit of the family. In the spring, Baha'u'llah appealed to the governor, and the family was moved to a somewhat more comfortable place within the city. Through all those months of travel, of fear and discomfort, Abdu'l-Bahá kept serving tirelessly more and more. He took care of the domestic duties of Baha'u'llah's household and also saw to the welfare of the other exiles. They stay almost 5 years in Adrianople. And Baha'u'llah wrote a lot of the tablets, and one of them was the tablets to the ruler and kings of the world.
As you can see here, there are several homes. There's the caravanserai, and there's the home of Riza Beg that's in the center bottom of the slide, and the home that they were last staying in their final 11 months, which is the home of Izzat Agha. What is significant about this home was that it was from here that Abdu'l-Bahā's father began to write his proclamatory letters to the rulers and kings of the world. Even though their beginning of their stay in Adrianople had been very difficult, as time went on, their character became known. And according to Abdu'l-Bahá, in a book that he first published anonymously, and later it became known that it was his book called A Traveler's Narrative, Abdu'l-Bahá said, according to statements heard from travelers and from certain great and learned men of that city, meaning Adrianople, They behaved and conducted themselves there also in such wise that the inhabitants of the district and the government officials used to eulogize them, and all used to show them respect and deference. Baha'u'llah was wont to hold intercourse with the doctors, scholars, magnates, and nobles, thereby attaining fame and celebrity throughout Rumelia. The materials of comfort were gathered together. Neither fear nor dread remained. They reposed on the couch of ease and passed their time in quietude, that is, until. As Baha'u'llah's popularity was increasing, so was the jealousy of his younger half-brother, a man named Mirza Yahya. This was a man that Baha'u'llah had taken care of ever since their father died, and Baha'u'llah's family would continue to prepare and take food over to this man throughout their journey, even though this uncle of Abdu'l-Bahá, even though Mirza Yahya was constantly disguising himself throughout the exile and was trying to avoid any kind of ill treatment that was meted out to the exiles. So he didn't want to be associated with the community. What's ironic is that Mirza Yahya, who was a follower of the Bab, had received a kind of figurehead leadership role in the Babi community by the Bab at Baha'u'llah's suggestion. This was to end at the time of the arrival of him whom God shall make manifest, which is who Baha'u'llah had claimed to be ever since the Garden of Rezvan. Eventually, as Baha'u'llah's popularity increased, the words of a man named Sayyid Muhammad to Mirza Yahya encouraged him and ultimately convinced him to murder Baha'u'llah so that he could do away with the cause of his jealousy. Since Mirza Yahya had made this decision, he first poisoned a well from which Baha'u'llah and his family took their water. While Baha'u'llah's family all became sick, none of them died. On another occasion, he started to invite Baha'u'llah to his home, which he didn't really like to do. And he invited Baha'u'llah to drink tea with him. And one time he smeared some poison, a concoction he had made with some poisonous herbs. And he gave Baha'u'llah this teacup that he had smeared the herbs on. And Baha'u'llah fell desperately ill. He was near death, and he remained seriously ill for an entire month. The effects of that attempt on Baha'u'llah's life remained with him for the rest of his days, and he had this hand tremor that could be seen in his handwriting. Abdu'l-Bahá, who was so close to his father and ready to give up his own life to protect Baha'u'llah from harm, could only watch and endure these things. Mirza Yahya began to try to find another way to kill Baha'u'llah, so he went to the barber of Baha'u'llah, Ustad Muhammad Ali Salmani, who was kind of a rough character. He hinted to the barber that he might put an end to Baha'u'llah's life while Baha'u'llah was visiting the bathhouse. This was so appalling to Ustad Muhammad that he went straight to Abdu'l-Bahá and told him what Mirza Yahya had suggested. Abdu'l-Bahá strongly urged him not to tell anyone, but this Ustad Muhammad, who you see pictured here, could contain himself. Before long, all the exiles knew, and a tremendous commotion began. Here you'll see a poem that this man, who was actually illiterate, had composed. He's composed many poems about Baha'u'llah. So he was really a fervent admirer and lover of Baha'u'llah. So you can understand why he was so infuriated by the suggestion from Mirza Yahya. When challenged, Mirza Yahya not only said that he never had any intention of harming Baha'u'llah, he accused this poor barber of having murderous intentions. Baha'u'llah challenged Mirza Yahya to acknowledge him as the one foretold by the Bab. In return, Mirza Yahya responded with his own claim of prophethood. These events caused Baha'u'llah so much anguish. He lamented, "He who for months and years I reared with the hand of loving kindness hath risen to take my life." So it was at this time that Baha'u'llah decided that there was no choice but to allow the Babis to choose between himself and Mirza Yahya. He took himself away into another residence so that they would not continue to have pressure to fight amongst themselves. He knew that the continuation of such internal dissension would destroy the faith, which had only just begun, and to bring to nothing everything that the Bab and his companions had sacrificed their lives. Thus, he secluded himself and advised his grieving companions to avoid all contention and to pray and trust in God. Sayyid Muhammad and Mirza Yahya widened the scope of their intrigues against Baha'u'llah. They spread even more damaging stories far and wide. And they got another person as an accomplice, a former Turkish artillery officer named Akka Can Bige Kachkola. The three of them wrote slanderous letters to the new governor of Adrianople, Khurshid Pasha. This person was already well acquainted with Baha'u'llah's character and reputation, so he took those letters and showed them to Baha'u'llah and asked for clarification. At this point, Baha'u'llah totally disassociated himself from his half-brother and asked his faithful followers to do the same. It was very difficult because in those days, as even today, you never break the family bond. So this was extremely painful for the family. As you know, Baha'u'llah had been taking care of Mirza Yahya like a son, but he could not risk the destruction of the faith.
Mirza Yahya was a covenant breaker of the older generation, and Mirza Muhammad Ali becomes a covenant breaker of the younger generation, and he shows himself at this time in Adrianople. He was a younger son of Baha'u'llah, a younger half-brother of Abdu'l-Bahá. He was born in 1853 in Baghdad. Baha'u'llah had bestowed upon Mirza Muhammad Ali the title of Greater Branch. Abdu'l-Bahá was the most great branch. Mirza Muhammad Ali was the greater branch. He had a high station from Baha'u'llah. He was a master of calligraphy and provided the important service to Baha'u'llah of transcribing his tablets, along with others in the family. He was about 15 at this time. In Adrianople, he composed a series of passages in Arabic, without Baha'u'llah's permission, disseminated them among the Persian Baha'is, even in Persia, and introduced them as verses of God, which he claimed were revealed by him. He intimated to the believers that he was a partner with Baha'u'llah in divine revelation. Such preposterous claims and display of personal ambition evoked the wrath of Baha'u'llah, who rebuked him vehemently and chastised him with his own hands. Baha'u'llah continued to give Mirza Muhammad Ali every opportunity to arise to the station that had been bestowed upon him, but he chose selfish desires and worldly ambitions instead. This was just the first episode regarding Mirza Muhammad Ali. It continued throughout his long life. He lived into his 80s. He would continue to undermine and usurp Abdu'l-Bahā's God-given station as the center of the covenant, and is regarded as the arch breaker of the covenant of Baha'u'llah.
While still in his teens, Abdu'l-Bahá became his father's ambassador, his shield, and his ammunition, transcribing some of Baha'u'llah's writings, including the Kitab-i-Iqan, the Book of Certitude. Abdu'l-Bahā's role became even more prominent in the subsequent stages of the family's banishment. First, during their 4-month-long stay in Constantinople, then in Adrianople, where they lived for more than 4 years, and finally in the prison city of Akka in Palestine, where the Ottoman authorities imprisoned them for 40 years. After Baha'u'llah publicly proclaimed his mission in Adrianople in 1867, He withdrew from the general public, leaving Abdu'l-Bahá to manage the affairs of the family and of the Baha'i exiles. Thus, Abdu'l-Bahá became his father's representative in all matters except those internal to the Baha'i community. As early as the Adrianople years, which were December 1863 through August 1868, Baha'u'llah fully revealed to his close disciples Abdu'l-Bahā's stature as his main support and most trusted servant. In the tablet of the branch, written in Adrianople, Baha'u'llah extols his eldest son as the branch of holiness. Render thanks unto God, O people, for his appearance, for verily he is the most great favor unto you, the most perfect bounty upon you. And through him every moldering vein is quickened. Whoso turneth towards him hath turned towards God, and whoso turneth away from him hath turned away from my beauty, hath repudiated my proof, and transgressed against me. Next to the Bab and Baha'u'llah, Abdu'l-Bahá occupies the highest station in the Baha'i faith. In the Kitab-i-Aqdas, the most holy book, Baha'u'llah enjoins the Baha'is to turn him whom God hath purposed, who hath branched from his ancient root, and to refer ye whatsoever ye understand not in the book to him who hath branched from his mighty stock. In these texts, in the tablet of the branch and the book of the covenant, which constitutes his will and testament, Baha'u'llah establishes Abdu'l-Bahā's authority as the center of the covenant, Baha'u'llah's covenant being the means by which he provided for the succession of leadership and the interpretation of his teachings after his passing.
In Adrianople, Baha'u'llah had become very revered and respected, as was his history in every city he'd been banished to. In Adrianople, Abdu'l-Bahá also spent time visiting with the governor. Pilgrims were coming in increasing numbers. The city of Adrianople was falling in love with the believers, and this upset three main people. The Turkish foreign minister gave false reports of the size and influence of the exiled people. The Azalis, who were followers of Mirza Yahya, said that Baha'u'llah was plotting with foreign powers, and the Persian minister requested further banishment. The Sultan listened, and an edict was given that the community of exiles had to leave immediately, within 24 hours, and guards were immediately placed at where they were habiting. However, as prior we have come to find out, Abdu'l-Bahá represented Baha'u'llah, the edict was changed through the negotiations of Abdu'l-Bahá, because Baha'u'llah had said they couldn't move in 24 hours because they had affairs to wrap up in Adrianople, and he wanted his steward to pay his debts in the city. This is a picture of Baha'is in Adrianople. In the middle is Abdu'l-Bahá, and next to him is Mirza Mehdi. And there's other people that you might recognize. As we've been told by prior speakers tonight, every time that the exiles in the Holy Family, their disciples and their servants were exiled, it came upon them this time when they had to leave Adrianople with the suddenness of a tornado. Bahiya Hanum was quoted as saying, while the exiles were waiting for their departure to Akka, they were staying in the port city of Gallipoli. There they were kept in suspense for 3 days. They heard they were indeed to be separated. The fear of imminent separation and dispersal caused acute distress. Now, dear friends, I ask you to close your eyes for a minute, to know that where you are is safe, and imagine all the people that you have loved in your life, all the people that have loved you, parents, siblings, children, aunties, uncles, cousins, dear, dear friends, people that have sustained and loved you and been there for you. Just feel them in your heart, your mind, your soul. Now open your eyes and imagine they're all gone. These were the type of feelings that the exiles and the Holy Family were going through, because they had been told that Baha'u'llah and his brothers were going to go to Akka, Mirza Yahya to Cyprus, and the rest of the party to Constantinople. However, due to Baha'u'llah's urging again, Abdu'l-Bahá was able for the second time to get the edict changed. Bahia Hanum said, finally, my brother, by his eloquence and argument and power of will, succeeded in gaining for the second time from the Constantinople government the concession that we should remain together.
Now, as Rose said, Baha'u'llah and 70 exiles spent 3 nights in Gallipoli, which is a town located on the shore of Marmara Sea. All the captives were to be gathered in that small town before embarking on their new journey to the prison city. The companions of Baha'u'llah constantly faced new challenges, and those challenges often stemmed from the contradictory reports about the possibility of dispersion of the friends, and also the extermination of Baha'u'llah. That was one of the major fears for a lot of the friends at that time. Baha'u'llah knew that there would be even harder challenges, so His Majesty warned his companions of upcoming hard times and greater divine tests, which will befall on each one of them. It was a warning that all the exiles, of course, disregarded. And when the news of Baha'u'llah's departure was confirmed, crowds began to gather at his door to bid farewell and to look for the last time upon his countenance. Their grief had no end, and signs of anguish and sorrow were witnessed on their faces. Now, to reach the Austrian boat, or the steamer, it was anchored far away actually from the shore. So Baha'u'llah and the friends had to actually use small sailing boats to get there. Many people reported that Baha'u'llah was uttering some holy verses as he boarded one of those small boats. In fact, many of Baha'u'llah's companions, including Janab Anis, were standing on the shore watching Baha'u'llah moving to an undisclosed destination. They were filled with sorrow, and tears flowed down their cheeks. Now, talking about steadfastness, talking about strength, and sorrow at the same time, there's a special story that is very close to Abdu'l-Bahā's heart. It's about Janab Munib. Janab Munib had health issues prior to the beginning of this journey. Although his health was in a precarious condition in Adrianople, he begged Baha'u'llah to permit him to be included amongst those who had the honor to be exiled with him. Janab Munib's condition actually became even worse on the ship. At one point in a town called Smyrna, he was carried to a hospital, but the guards, of course, refused to let them stay for more than 1 hour. Abdu'l-Bahá had to lay him down to bed at the hospital and kiss his forehead, and that was the last time he saw him, because a few days after he passed away. I want to quote Abdu'l-Bahā's words about that time. Abdu'l-Bahá said, "Whenever I think of that moment, the tears come. My heart is heavy, and I summon up the remembrance of what he was, a great man, infinitely wise he was, steadfast, modest, and grave, and there was no one like him for faith and certitude," end quote. Now, 3 days Baha'u'llah had been sailing on water from the Mediterranean Sea between Smyrna and Alexandria. And once they reached Alexandria, they were to change boats. They were also allowed to go ashore and purchase food. They also made several other stops in Alexandria and Haifa. That was one of the hardest times of that entire trip. According to Baha'i Khanum, the boat was very, very small. It was very, very hot. There was an overpowering smell on the boat. They had no food. In fact, a lot of the food that they purchased would also go bad because of the heat, because of the salt. Everyone basically were severely impacted. Finally, after 8 hours of what she called, by the way, a positive misery, they reached Akka on the morning of August 31st, 1868.
The refugees arrived here at the sea gate of Akka. And despite the rigors of the journey and the scores of citizens who assembled at the port to mock and jeer at the one labeled the God of the Persians, Baha'u'llah stated, "Upon our arrival, we were welcomed with banners of light, whereupon the voice of the Spirit cried out, saying, 'Soon will all that dwell on earth be enlisted under these banners.'"
Soon will all that dwell on earth be enlisted under his banners. Soon will all that dwell on earth be enlisted under his banners.
In the world of the spirit, there were banners of light that would one day attract the entire world. But in the world of the physical realm, the city they were entering was the most desolate of cities. Akka was surrounded by a double system of ramparts, was inhabited by a people whom Baha'u'llah stigmatized as the generation of vipers, was devoid of any source of water within its gates, was flea-infested, damp, and honeycombed with gloomy, filthy, and tortuous lanes. Baha'u'llah, in his letter to the Sultan of Turkey, wrote that Akka was the most desolate of the cities of the world, the most unsightly of them in appearance, the most detestable in climate, and the foulest in water. It is as though it were the metropolis of the owl. This is a public passageway there. In the intense summer heat, they marched through these passageways to the prison. On the way to the prison, the exiles were led past the Al-Jazar Mosque, where soon after their arrival, the sentence of the Sultan Abdul-Aziz was read, a sentence that not only condemned them to perpetual banishment, but stipulated their strict incarceration, forbade them to associate either with each other or with the local inhabitants. And the exiles were taken through these narrow and filthy streets to the prison. And this is a photo of the stairs leading up into the prison. This is now a place of pilgrimage, and it has been restored to look like this today. But in the time of Baha'u'llah, it was like that former picture. A group of family and followers numbering some 70 souls were imprisoned with Baha'u'llah in the citadel of Akka. They were to stay here for more than 2 years. And the two windows at the right and the back, that's the room Baha'u'llah occupied. Pilgrims would come just to see him wave a handkerchief out that window. This is the barrack square. When they first arrived at the citadel, the exiles were taken to rooms adjoining the barrack square. The floor of one of the rooms was covered in mud, and the heat and humidity combined with the stench of the prison so overwhelmed Baha'i Khanum that she fainted. So filthy and brackish was the water in the pool of the courtyard that no one could drink it. 3 loaves of black and salty bread were assigned to each, which they were later permitted to exchange when escorted by guards to the market for 2 of better quality. Subsequently, they were allowed a mere pittance as a substitute for the allotted dole of bread. All fell sick except 2 shortly after their arrival. Malaria, dysentery, combined with the sultry heat, added to their miseries. Inside the citadel, Baha'u'llah and his companions eventually were led to their cells in the northwestern wing of the citadel, grim, hot, and inhospitable, where they were put under guard. The cell which Baha'u'llah occupied is to the left in this picture. And this is a picture of the cell of Baha'u'llah. Referring to the hardships which he and his companions endured in the prison of Akka, Baha'u'llah states, "None knoweth what befell us except God, the Almighty, the All-Knowing. From the foundations of the world
Until the present day, a cruelty such as this hath neither been seen nor heard of."
During this time, as in other parts of the story and throughout his life, Abdu'l-Bahá remained a source of assistance to the family as well as to his father. He continued to protect his father, take care of the sick, and poor in the city. And he gradually expanded his service beyond just the community of the believers and of the exiles. His generosity of spirit, selfless service, and adherence to principle endeared him to those who came to know him, and in time, won over even the most hard-hearted of enemies. Abdu'l-Bahá was extremely instrumental in the relationship between the Baha'i community and the greater community. It was through his efforts that those relationships, wherever they went, always improved. That was one of his great qualities and gifts to the community. There are 2 quick little incidents that illustrate some of this. When they arrived and were being taken from the ship to the shore, there was no port, there was no landing port. They just had to walk through the water and go out into the city. And it was the intention of the authorities that the women would be carried on the shoulders of the men. If you know anything about the culture of that time, this was a great insult to the women and to the men as well. So Abdu'l-Bahá interceded. He refused to allow that to happen. He arranged for a chair to be brought out so that the women could be carried one by one via this chair to have at least some semblance of dignity during this horrible process. And then later, having to do with the circumstances around how they were being treated and so on, very soon after they arrived, the governor visited the barracks for inspection, and Abdu'l-Bahá, accompanied by a few others, went to see him. And the governor thought these were a bunch of low-life prisoners, and he had no respect for them at all. He was discourteous and spoke to them in a provocative manner. He threatened to cut the supply of bread if one of the prisoners went missing and ordered them back to their room. Well, one of the individuals who had gone with Abdu'l-Bahá could not remain silent after hearing such insulting treatment. And he retorted with rage and hurled back at the governor some offensive remarks. Abdu'l-Bahá, in the presence of everybody, chastised Hussein, his name was Hussein Iashi, very severely and ordered him to return to his room. This action by Abdu'l-Bahá not only diffused a dangerous situation, the governor had all kinds of power. He could have ordered a summary execution, but he also opened the eyes of the governor to the existence of a real leader among the prisoners, one who could act with authority and justice. This incident became a point of honor in the life of Hussein Iashi as well. He wrote in his memoirs about this incident. So these are just 2 examples of how the intercession of Abdu'l-Bahá helped to elevate the status of the prisoners. When the prisoners first arrived, the news of their coming was that these were the lowest of the low, the most evil of evil, because Akka was the prison where the worst criminals in the empire were sent. That's in part why they were jeered. But through all of these efforts of Abdu'l-Bahá, gradually that whole opinion changed.
We must look higher than all earthly thoughts. Detach ourselves from every material idea. Crave for the things of the Spirit. Let nothing grieve thee and be angered at none. When calamity striketh, be patient and composed. Be thou not unhappy. The tempest of sorrow shall pass. Regret will not last. Disappointment will vanish. We must look higher. We must look higher than all earthly thoughts. We must look higher, higher. Let nothing grieve thee and be angered at none. We must look higher, higher. Crave for the things of the Spirit. Let nothing grieve thee and be angered at none.
Attendees, you are now invited to share stories and quotes. They can be from other years and other authors, but should help us better understand Abdu'l-Bahá. This is an opportunity to practice telling a story from memory. Thank you.
The person who wrote "Soon will all that dwell on earth" is Van Gilmer. He used to teach it to us when we were in feasts and so on. He would bring his guitar and he would sing, and he taught us music. And I've never heard it in a major key. It was always basically a minor key, but the harmonization here was a little different. But he said he heard a speaker at a Baha'i conference say that Abdu'l-Bahá said, "The soon will all that dwell on earth be enlisted under these banners." And then the speaker said, "Ya Baha'u'llah," and Van thought that was part of the quote. And so that's why he always can, that's why the song is as it is. So, but anyway, the composer's Van Gilmer.
In this picture, the little girl sitting next to Abdu'l-Bahá with the ringlet curls, her original name was Rebecca Jones. And she lived in New York, and her family traveled from New York all the way, I think, to Minnesota with the entourage of Abdu'l-Bahá when she was 8 years old. And she was, when she grew up, my Baha'i Sunday school teacher. So she used to share stories of being with Abdu'l-Bahá. So the first story is Abdu'l-Bahá was giving children names, changing their names. And Rebecca desperately wanted Abdu'l-Bahá to do this, but she was a little bit shy and she didn't want to ask him, but she kept thinking, I'd love for Abdu'l-Bahá to give me a new name. So they were in a gathering. I don't remember where it was. She turned to her, put his hands on her shoulder, looked at her and said, Ruhiya, Ruhiya, Ruhiya. So that's how she got her name. Abdu'l-Bahá gave it to her when she was 8 years old. Another one is kind of cute. Another wish she had for Abdu'l-Bahá was to spend some private time with him. All of the children were always all around him. And he had taken a few of the children off to spend private time. And she hadn't had her private time yet. So one day while they were in Chicago in the winter, she got her time. He took her to Lincoln Park. And they walked all over Lincoln Park. In the new version of this book, the newer one, there's lots of pictures of Abdu'l-Bahá with a little girl in Lincoln Park, and that's the same little girl. And he got a little tired. So they sat on a bench, and a gentleman came up to say hello. He turns to Ruhiya and says, oh, I see you have an in on Santa Claus. And Abdu'l-Bahá says, no English. So that's kind of a cute one. And then the third story is there was an entourage that always went with Abdu'l-Bahá, and Abdu'l-Bahá standing and shaking hands was very difficult on his feet. His feet chronically hurt him all the time. When he was shackled, it left scars almost to the bone, and it weakened his ankles something severely. He was in constant pain. So they had a ritual of massaging and soaking his feet before he had to stand. And she wanted to be one of the ones to help. So he said like this for her to come, and she sat, and she was to dry his feet. But when he lifted his Abba up and she saw the scars, she gasped, and he sent her away because it was too hard for her to see how he had suffered. The other one is when Abdu'l-Bahá was leaving in New York, all of the children, everybody gathered around, and he had this beautiful basket, and he had candies and treats for the children. And Ruhiya was at the back of the line. And so he was giving out all the candies and saying goodbye. And she was noticing that the candies were getting smaller and smaller, and she started counting, and she went, I don't know if I'm going to get a candy. And she started to get really worried until there were no more candies for her. And she started to look really sad, but he turned to her and gave her the basket. And every year at Rizwan, she would give us candies from that same basket. She was my Sunday school teacher. Okay. She was an art teacher, and she used to stand in the middle of the table and chairs that were in a horseshoe. And she would give us these art lessons to do. And while we drew on the quotes and all of this stuff, she would tell us these stories. And she always had this little giggle. She'd go, and then she'd tell the story about Abdu'l-Bahá.
Yeah, she was a fixture of the Long Island Sunday School. She was my Sunday school teacher too.
I wanted to read a couple of excerpts. It's a segment from Abdu'l-Bahā's Memorials of the Faithful. This one is interesting because it throws a different light on the function and the greatness of Abdu'l-Bahá in the prison city of Akka. Memorials of the Faithful is a collection of 69 stories about believers that had passed away, that Abdu'l-Bahá remembered in the evening of his life, in his tired hours. He dictated these stories of precious believers who had passed on before. One of his most powerful stories in this book, Memorials of the Faithful, is about one of the great descendants of the Bab who was a faithful believer in Baha'u'llah. This was Mirza Muhammad Ali, the Afnan. And this story has an amazing depth and historical sweep to it. I will read just some pieces of it so you get an idea. And remember, these are the words of Abdu'l-Bahá. This was not an account about Abdu'l-Bahá. These are the stories dictated and recorded of Abdu'l-Bahā's own statements. And he says regarding Mirza Muhammad Ali, in the days of Baha'u'llah, during the worst times in the most great prison, they would not permit any of the friends either to leave the fortress or to come in from the outside. Whenever they spied a Baha'i traveler, they would hurry away to the governor, tell him the traveler was bringing letters, and would carry answers back. The governor would then arrest the traveler, seize his papers, jail him, and drive him out. This became an established custom. It was at such a time that the Afnan, Haji Mirza Muhammad Ali, the great bough of the holy tree, journeyed to Akka, coming from India to Egypt and from Egypt to Marseille. One day, I was up on the roof. Remember, this is Abdu'l-Bahá speaking. I was up on the roof of the caravanserai. Some of the friends were with me, and I was walking up and down. It was sunset. At that moment, glancing at the distant seashore, I observed that a carriage was approaching. Gentlemen, I said, I feel that a holy being is in that carriage. It was still far away, hardly within sight. Let us go to the gate, I told them. Although they will not allow us to pass through, we can stand there till he comes. I took one or two people with me, and we left. At the city gate, I called to the guard, privately gave him something, and said, a carriage is coming in, and I think it's bringing one of our friends. When it reaches here, do not hold it up. Do not refer the matter to the governor. He put out a chair for me, and I sat down. By this time, the sun had set. They shut the main gate too, but the little door was open. The gatekeeper stayed outside. The carriage drew up. The gentleman had arrived. What a radiant face he had. He was nothing but light from head to foot. Just to look at that face made one happy. And he was so confident, so assured, so rooted in his faith, and his expression so joyous. He was truly a blessed being, a man who made progress day by day, every day adding to his certitude and faith, his luminous quality, his ardent love. He made extraordinary progress during the few days he spent in the most great prison. The point is, when his carriage had come only part of the way from Haifa to Akka, one could already perceive his spirit, his light. After he received endless bounties showered on him by Baha'u'llah, he was given leave to go, and he traveled to China. There, over a considerable period, he spent his days mindful of God and in a manner conformable to divine good pleasure. Later, he went on to India, where he died. The other revered Afnan and the friends in India felt it was advisable to send his blessed remains to Iraq, ostensibly to Najaf, to be buried near the holy city, for the Muslims had refused to let him lie in their graveyard. Akka Syeda Sajila, who was in Bombay at the time, was deputized to transport the remains with all due reverence to Iraq. Hostile Persians were on the steamship, and when they reached Bushehr, reported that his coffin, the great Babi, was being carried to Najaf for burial in the Vale of Peace, and such a thing was not permissible. His body came as far as Basra. Since that was a period when the friends had to be in concealment, Syeda Sajila was obliged to proceed as if he was going for the burial in Najaf. There was a great commotion. In the end, the case took on such importance, it proved impossible to bring the remains to Najaf. Here, too, there was no burial place where the Afnan's body would be safe. Finally, he decided to carry it to the shrine of Persia's Salman the Pure, the herald of the Prophet Muhammad, just outside Baghdad, and bury it in Ctesiphon, close to the grave of Salman, beside the palace of the Sasanian kings of ancient Persia. The body was taken there. That trust of God was, with all reverence, laid down in a safe resting place by the palace of Nashirvan. And this was destiny, that after a lapse of 1,300 years from the time when the throne of city of Persia's ancient kings was trampled down, and no trace of it was left except for rubble, hills of sand, and the very palace roof had cracked and split, half of it toppled to the ground. This edifice should win back the kingly pomp and splendor of its former days. It is indeed a mighty arch. Thus did God's grace and favor encompass the Persians of an age long gone, in order that their ruined capital should be rebuilt and flourish again. To this end, with the help of God, events were brought about which led to the Afghans being buried there. There's no doubt a proud city will rise up on this site. I wrote many letters about it until at last the holy dust could be laid to rest in this place. Syed Sajala had informed me from Baghdad he was at his wit's end and had no idea where he would consign the body to the grave. Wherever I might bury it, he wrote, they will dig it up again. But at last, praise be God, it was laid down in the very spot to which, time and again, the blessed beauty had repaired, in that place, honored by his footsteps, where he had revealed tablets, where the believers of Baghdad had been in his company, the very place where the most great name was wont to stroll. How did this come about? It was due to the Afghan's purity of heart. I loved the Afghan very much. Because of him, I rejoiced. I wrote a long visitation tablet for him and sent it with other papers to Persia. His burial site is one of the holy places where a magnificent Mashrul Ashkar must be raised up. If possible, the actual arch of the royal palace should be restored and become the house of worship. The auxiliary buildings of the house of worship should likewise be erected there. Hospitals, schools, university, elementary school, refuge for the poor and indigent, haven for the orphans, and the traveler's hospice. Gracious God, that royal edifice was once splendidly decked forth and fair, but there are spiders' webs there today, where hung those curtains of gold brocade, and where the king's drums beat and the musicians played. The only sound is the harsh cries of kites and crows. This is verily the capital of the owl's realm, where thou wilt hear no sound save only the echo of his repeated calls. That is how the barracks were when we came to Akka. There were a few trees inside the walls and on their branches, as well as up on the battlements. The owls cried all night long. How disquieting is the hoot of such owls. How it saddens the heart. But from earliest youth until he grew helpless and old, that sacred bough of the holy tree, with his smiling face, shone out like a lamp in the midst of all. Then he leapt and soared to undying glory and plunged into the ocean of light. A beautiful example of Abdu'l-Bahá's skill in storytelling and in a historic moment. It's not too many people who are considered so pure that an entire city shall be raised up around their grave. And it was all because of Abdu'l-Bahá writing letters and influencing all these people to cause that to be so.
This gentleman has, by coincidence, the same name as Mirza Muhammad Ali in our story, but it's a different person.
But this one is a well-revered Afnan, descendant of the Bahá.
One other person, whenever you think of Abdu'l-Bahá, that always comes to mind, and that is his sister, the Greatest Holy Leaf. As some of you know, I've done a few workshops on the Greatest Holy Leaf. In my research, I found a notation where Abdu'l-Bahá states that he could not do what was asked of him without the love and the support of his dear sister. In times of strife and difficulties, Shoghi Effendi tells us we are to look to her. So Abdu'l-Bahá would not be Abdu'l-Bahá without the loving support of his devoted sister. She kind of sort of gets forgotten, but you know, she holds the highest station of any woman. She kept the Baha'i world together multiple times. Yeah. So it did not fall into the hands of the covenant breakers. And when Abdu'l-Bahá came to America, she was it. She had full authority to do what was necessary while he was gone.
She controlled all the finances. She discharged all the expenses and debts. She kept everybody coordinated while Abdu'l-Bahá was on the other side of the world.
Right.
She handled it.
And when he passed, she was the glue that kept everybody together. And she wrote letters to help ease people's sorrow when she herself was broken-hearted and devastated by the loss of her brother. But instead, she took care of all of us.
Some of the most heart-wrenching things you can read are the eulogies of Shoghi Effendi for the greatest holy leaf when she passed. He relied upon her so much.
Everything was suspended for 9 months. He talks about how he took comfort in the arms of his great aunt and how she nurtured him and sustained him. And he married his wife in the room of the greatest holy leaf.
Years ago, one of my favorite studies with a group of Baha'is was of the historical work Century of Light about the 20th century. Think about what happened in the 20th century. The First World War, the first pandemic, the Second World War, the atomic bombs, massive dislocations of this and that and the other thing. Unbelievable large-scale things that had never happened before. However, as a Baha'i, what's the most important event of the 20th century? The ministry of Abdu'l-Bahá is more important than any of those things. The world wars will pass into history, as all the wars do, but Abdu'l-Bahá, he will have an influence for multiple centuries.
The tablets of the divine plan are still being unfurled now.
Recently read the tablets of the divine plan and you just go, when did he write these? You sure he didn't look out the window and write them yesterday?
This is a book. It's stories told by Abdu'l-Bahá. It was compiled by a gentleman named Dr. Amir Badier. And I thought I'd just read one little excerpt. Again, this is a story Abdu'l-Bahá told, not something that somebody's telling about him. Here's the background for it. One day in Akka, a woman told Abdu'l-Bahá that she had been a Baha'i for 9 years and that she felt younger every day. He said that in reality, she was only 9 years old. And then he related this story. A great king walking in his garden one day noticed a man about 90 years old planting some trees. The king asked what he was doing, and the old man answered that he was planting date seeds. How long before they will bear fruit? Asked the king. 20 years, the old man answered, but you will not live to enjoy the fruit. Why then should you plant these trees? Said the king. The man answered, the last generation planted trees that bore fruit for my benefit. So it is now my duty to plant for the benefit of the next generation. The king was pleased at this answer, so gave the man a piece of money. The gardener fell on his knees and thanked him. The king asked, why do you kneel before me? Because, your majesty, not only have I had the pleasure or gift of planting these seeds, but they have already borne fruit since you gave me this money. This so pleased the king, he gave the man another piece of money. Again, the old gardener knelt, saying, again, I kneel to thank your majesty. Most trees will bear fruit only once. Well, these trees of mine have already borne 2 crops, since you give me 2 pieces of money. The king smiled and asked, well, how old are you? The man answered, I'm 12 years old. How can that be? You are surely a very old man. The gardener answered, in the days of the king, your predecessor, the people were in a most unhappy state of constant warfare and trouble. So I cannot include that as part of my life. But since your majesty came to rule, the people are happy, contented, and at peace. Therefore, as I sit but 12 years since your gracious reign began, I am only 12 years old. This pleased the king so much that, perforce, he gave the old man another piece of money, saying, I shall have to leave you now, for your words please me so greatly that if I listen to you longer, I shall become a pauper.
Under a grove of trees near Lake Michigan, while in Chicago in 1912, Abdu'l-Bahá gave intimate and loving counsel to his friends. Some of you may have observed that I have not called attention to any of your individual shortcomings. I would suggest to you that if you shall be similarly considerate in your treatment of each other, it will be greatly conducive to the harmony of your association with each other.
In the story that we told, at every step of the way, the exiles were worried about being separated from each other. There was a quote, which I haven't been able to find, but it's when they then reach the barracks and they are put in the cell and the door closes, and Bahia Khanum, if I remember right, was quoted, or she wrote later, about the sense of overwhelming relief, even in that squalid condition, because they were together.
She also writes how her mother was strong and reassured them. And her mother was very young. She was a teenager when she married Baha'u'llah.
I think Baha'u'llah was either 18 or 19 when they were married, so she would have been younger.
I think she was 16. In the book, The Prophet's Daughter, it talks about the time when they were exiled and always being threatened. The pilgrims would come. Janet Khan relates the story of how at any time they could have sent a little message, tried to get help or support once the pilgrims left, but instead they offered them the utmost hospitality. And there was one group that was coming and the guards were on the wall. If they had said anything, they had permission to come in and do whatever, shoot or whatever. They were going to have this dinner party in the front room, but when they looked out the window, they saw, well, we don't want our guests to see that. So they rearranged everything to another room and treated them with the utmost kindness and love, and nobody knew that their lives were threatened. If that isn't the epitome of dignity, of hospitality, of commitment, of love, of understanding, I don't know what is.
In Adrianople, Baha'u'llah and his family had a kitchen for the poor. They were doing all this work. They didn't change their character. They were the same people in Persia. They were the same people in Constantinople and Adrianople and Baghdad. The barber, he has his own memoirs. He didn't go through like formal education. He was illiterate probably all his life. I think maybe he dictated the memoirs, or maybe someone taught him to read and write eventually, but he would come up with poems while he was doing Baha'u'llah's hair and beard in the bathhouse in Baghdad. One day, my Arabic professor sent me this video that his Iranian Shiite Muslim favorite student had sent him. And the video, it's a chant in Arabic. The other woman then starts chanting in Farsi. I shared it with my mom. I said, is this like a poem by Rumi or by Tahir? I Googled some of the words, and it turns out that it was by this Baha'i barber about Baha'u'llah, and it was all about his hair. Well, it wasn't all about his hair, but it started talking about Baha'u'llah's hair.
In his American tour in 1912, Grace Robarts of Washington, D.C. offered her services to Abdu'l-Bahá. She had in mind the idea of performing the role of an on-call hostess and social secretary, arranging appointments for the master, greeting the guests, serving tea. Instead, she found herself consigned to the kitchen, helping Mahmoud, Abdu'l-Bahā's cook. One of the favorite dishes of the master and his Persian retinue was, of course, tadik, crunchy rice cooked with generous amounts of butter. The Persians then, as now, were particularly fond of the lowest layer of the rice that is burned to the bottom of the pot. Because the rice is literally fried to the bottom of the pot, cleaning the utensils is aching work. The buttery residue also makes the chore rather greasy. It was Robart's job to clean the heavy skillets. She discovered that the Persians were so fond of Tahdig that her pot scouring duties became almost full-time work. Robarts was spending her life toiling in the kitchen while others were being enchanted by the company of Abdu'l-Bahá. The woman who had pictured herself as a gracious hostess was reduced to the rank of grease-smeared scullery maid. On June 29th, the day of a unity picnic in West Englewood, New Jersey, the sink was once again full of grimy pots, and it looked like Grace Roberts' day would be spent cleaning them. Surveying the stack of rice-encrusted cookware, Robarts shut the kitchen door and began to sob. Suddenly, the door burst open and in strode Abdu'l-Bahá. He looked at the surprised, tear-streaked woman and at the sink full of dishes and began to laugh. Making a pun on her name, Grace, he called out to her saying, "Grace!" She began laughing too. Abdu'l-Bahá had come to the kitchen to invite Roberts to attend the picnic with him. Her days in the kitchen were over.
And that event is known as the Souvenir, and it's been reenacted every year. I don't know about last year with the COVID thing, but every other year since that time. Yeah.
And a good bit of Tahdig is eaten every time.
So this is a story that our father Midge would tell, and I don't know if it's true or not. So I'm asking if anybody can validate it. But it's a story that took place in New York. The Kinneys were very active Baha'is in that area and hosted Abdu'l-Bahá and had many meetings at their home. This one night, Abdu'l-Bahá had been out and they asked after him. They seemed to be concerned that he was too tired and they wanted to, they were kind of fawning over him. And he looked at them and without saying a word, he scooped up Bafa Kinney, who was a large man, and ran up the stairs laughing just to show that he was fine. I have not heard that story any other place, but it's one my father used to tell all the time.
Abdu'l-Bahá loved their home, and according to Nat Rudstein, especially, who's connected by family ties to some old-time Baha'is, Nat Rudstein used to say that the Kinney homestead, where Abdu'l-Bahá loved to visit and give talks and stay, was absolute chaos. There were animals, birds, monkeys, people going in and out, and Abdu'l-Bahá thought they were wonderful. He loved the Kinneys beyond measure. And they were just running sort of a local grandstand station for the believers and anybody else who came in.
Yeah.
They were amazing people.
Abdu'l-Bahá used humor a lot. This is in Earl Redmond's book, Abdu'l-Bahá in Their Midst. He talks about how when Abdu'l-Bahá entered a room, he could sense all the emotions of the people in the room. He could feel everything. When he went to many church activities and so forth, here's this man dressed differently with this entourage of people, and people didn't know what to make of it. So he always told a story and used humor to set the stage. It's like he cleaned out their ears so that they could hear the message. He used humor and stories to connect the hearts first, then he gave his talk.
Those of us who've been putting this story together, we were bowled over by how young Abdu'l-Bahá is in these stages, perhaps before Adrianople, but he's like 15 years old and he's writing documents. He's managing the household. He's dealing with people who come from the Baha'i community and from outside. It's like, wow, the maturity. No wonder he was able to handle all of these situations because he had seen so much.
Yeah.
We're finding that there's a lot of things behind the scenes happening with Abdu'l-Bahá during this time. And generally speaking, this is the time that's, for obvious reasons, it's devoted to Baha'u'llah. This is the time of his ministry on earth. But Abdu'l-Bahá is there, not completely in the background, but not in the forefront as he is later when we associate that time with him when he comes here and travels other places and is obviously the center of the covenant, the one head of the faith after the passing of Baha'u'llah. But his influence during this time is extremely significant. And from doing this, I've gained a much greater appreciation for everything that he did during this time as well. It's remarkable.
I can see a deepening strategy in the future where you give a group a question and then you give them an hour or 37 minutes or something, and they all go to the internet and start reading, because reading is the way that we learn this. And so we were making ourselves read more than we normally would.
And there's a lot more out there now that it's the year devoted. So much more information is pouring out about Abdu'l-Bahá.
We have an ongoing study group for Memorials of the Faithful. Bill in particular is noteworthy as our sort of in-house researcher. We read one or two of the names of these famous Baha'is or their family or a place that Abdu'l-Bahá mentions, and we go off on the internet and we go sideways on a little research as to what that was all about. Who was this imam? What was that shrine? Where was this palace? Who was that famous Baha'i? And it's really very illuminating. It's just miraculous how much more we can delve into the writings and the histories. And it only came after 1844.
I found online scanned, very accurate versions of Dawnbreakers and Tahir's Days, volume 1, 2, 3, 4. I didn't know about them even a month ago, but you just keep looking. You think it's not there, and then it'll pop up.